Now, what's going to drive us into this underclass structure? First of all, are the legacies of slavery and Jim Crowism. We are still bearing the burdens and the scars. They were never corrected. That's one of the failings of our leadership in this country. They had the nerve, the audacity to let black folks suffer for 460 years. And at the end of the civil rights movement, rather than going back and saying, let's find out what has happened to black folk for 460 years. Have they been psychologically, emotionally, politically, educationally damaged? Nobody spent 1 minute of time trying to figure out what had happened to black folk over all that period of time. So in the course of the civil rights movement, at the end of it, they say, well, let's pretend that nothing has happened to them, that they were not injured, they were not hurt. And now let's go seek integration and pretend that we're all equal. Now that was grossly unfair, because by that point in time, and by the 1966 period, whites had become economic giants in America. They owned and controlled everything at that point in time. Black folk didn't own anything. Whites controlled almost 100% of all the wealth, the income, the privileges, the businesses, the resources, and all levels of government. Blacks had nothing. Blacks were 1-foot midgets. And they allowed us then to use integration to walk from our communities, from our ghettos, over in their communities, totally disarmed, not understanding anything, blind, naked, and then saying that you can go and compete. Compete with what? And that's what the whole thing will be about this morning. You got to change the way you're seeing and thinking and behaving. Why? Because I said we've been locked into an underclass structure, because we got two major problems in America. One problem is that maldistribution of wealth and resources I told you about that's in South African America, where whites own and control everything. That's your number one problem. The second problem we're going to talk about this morning is the inappropriate behavior pattern of black folk. Those are the only two problems you have. I don't care what anybody else talks about in America. It's not worthwhile wasting your time. The problem in America is not drug abuse, crime, low-income housing, public housing, food stamps, welfare, teenage pregnancy. Those are symptoms of a problem. The symptoms are the fact that you don't own and control anything to run you and control your lives. That's the problem. And the second thing is inappropriate behavior pattern. A black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means where one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resource that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never in the history of this earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources and where they can have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century, when you began to commercialize slavery against blacks. That's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing, and before I get into my presentation, you got to understand racism also comes from the word race. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about now, you cannot prove racism because somebody fired you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism, because racism does not apply to an individual. It applies to a group. And because I discriminate against you, that's individual, that's personal. It's not group-based, and so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, remember also, which is very important for our discussion today, is the word race means being in competition. See, they didn't pick house, tree, car. They said racism. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we are in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete or survive, or not compete and perish.
As the Cheshire Cat said to Alice, who was lost in a Wonderland fantasy, it doesn't matter which road you take if you don't know where you are going. It is time for Black America to take a good hard look at where they have come from and where they are going. Are they moving forward or standing still? After centuries of participating in protest, marches, race riots, and demonstrations, and pushing for integration and passages of endless number of civil rights laws, Black Americans are increasingly sensing that something is wrong. Go figure, right? They question whether or not they are on the right road. A comparative analysis of socioeconomic conditions shows that Black Americans have entered the new millennium much the same as they entered the previous 4 centuries, as an impoverished, powerless, and neglected people, since there have yet to be any programs and public policies specifically ordered to eliminate the plight of the black masses, their future, like their past, looks bleak. Amidst a rising tide of white conservatism, the wealth and income gaps between majority white society and blacks are widening. Nearly half a century after the Supreme Court ordered racial desegregation, Black Americans still bear 6 to 8 times their proportional share of poverty, broken homes, homelessness, criminal incarceration, unemployment, and other social pathologies. Desegregation should have been about redistribution of wealth, power, and resources, not social integration. So social integration has only addressed the symptoms of our issues, of our dilemma, rather than the causes. It is extremely difficult for Black people to progress when the same hands that held the whip still holds almost all the wealth and power. And happy Monday and welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and we are beginning our reading of Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Powernomics, the National Plan to Empower Black America. We just completed our reading of Neely Fuller's The Compensatory Code. Good book. Go get it. Go get it. Go get it. I put up the poll in my community tab, and with 34% of the votes, Dr. Claude Anderson's Powernomics won, and that was the book that you guys chose for us to read and review. So here we are reading and reviewing Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Powernomics. And I just opened up, giving a, I just opened up on page 1 of chapter 1. Dr. Claude Anderson opening up, talking about the challenges that we face in America. As we go deeper in the book, he's going to explain more of the challenges that we face internally and externally, and leading up to his plan of how we can improve and empower ourselves as Black people. But first, we have to look in the mirror at ourselves and be honest with ourselves. And that's why I love that we started with the ISIS papers and the compensatory code. Because, all right, now we know what white people did from a psychological standpoint. We know how it affected us, and we know what racism is. And now we're finna look at it more from an economic standpoint. But all in all, I believe all the books go together, even though we're just getting into it. But even from the information that I'm reading in chapter 1, I believe all of the information goes together. And chapter 1 goes from page 1 to page 30. So make sure you catch up on the reading of page 1 to page 30. So I'm picking back up on the second paragraph of page 3. All right. Blacks should get off of the social road to nowhere. There are no yellow brick roads to the future, nowhere Blacks simply stumble into the wealth and power in a comparative society. To find a better road requires Blacks to unlearn old behavior models, strategies, and learned hopelessness in the race matters. Blacks must understand the nature of the competitive race and make a radical metamorphosis that they must decide where they want to go, get out front of their competitors, and work hard to get there first. If Blacks compete, they can expect to succeed and survive the race for wealth and power. And that's what we're just getting into. That's the part we're going to get into now, is the race for wealth and power. But remember, racism is a team sport. Racism is a team sport. You see in the clip, he's talking about they chose the word race for a specific reason, because he's talking about competition for wealth, power, land, and resources. I talk about this all the time. Race is a competition for wealth, power, land, and resources. We are the only ones not willing to play the game. We're the only ones who don't have a team. Now, we have players that could be on the team, but because we don't operate as a team, because we don't think as a team, because we haven't solidified ourselves under codes as a team, we're in the game that we're forced to play, but we're not playing it right. And we don't want to, a lot of us don't want to play the game, but whether you want to play the game or not, the game is being played, and the game is going to dictate your quality of life and your existence. So if you want to have more control, if we want to have more control in our existence and our quality of life, we have to understand the game that is played around us and get our shit together, become a codified unit of people, and play this game to win. Stop trying to be nice. Stop trying to be friendly. Stop trying to sit on the sidelines. Stop just trying to just make it and just survive. We have to thrive as a group. We have to put our We have to pool our resources together and work together as a unit to win. That's how we win as a society, pooling our resources together and working together in this race, in this competition that we're in. So he says, race, racism, and wealth. Although slavery and Jim Crow, semi-slavery ended generations ago, their legacies live on in various forms of structural racism. Contrary to popular notions about the concept of race, it is more than a biological grouping. Race is about financial, political, and social currencies. It is a form of stored wealth and power. Whiteness has monetary value. Knowing the origin and nature of the value of race is essential to the analysis of Black America's dilemma. It is important that Blacks know why the race problem refuses to die and how it is used to keep them in a non-competitive and powerless group. The word race first appeared with the emergence of the slave practice in the 16th century. Records indicate the word race was selected because the various European slave trading nations were in a contest competing to profit from the mineral and human wealth of Africa. Let me say that again. Records indicate that the word race was selected because the various European slave trading nations were in a contest competing to profit from mineral and human wealth of Africa. The prize for winning the race was the power to develop the Western civilizations using the wealth extracted out of Africa. Black people were non-competitors in the race, and we still are. To our demise, we're non-competitors in the race. They were the prizes, so they could never play nor win. That's how it was. That's not how it is. We can play to win now. We're not enslaved. We're not physically enslaved. We may be mentally, emotionally, psychologically enslaved, but we're no longer physically enslaved. So because we're no longer physically enslaved, that means we can make the decision, we can make better decisions for ourselves. But the problem is the psychological job that has been done on us. So that's why it was important for us to read the ISIS papers in the compensatory code so we can better understand the psychological aspects of slavery. Remember, it affects every area. Racism affects every area of human activity. This is the area of economics. We're specifically concentrating on the area of economics while we're reading Powernomics, but we're learning how racism affects economics in more detail, right? So Blacks are the only group of people forced to practice capitalism without capital in the richest, most capitalistic nation on earth. That's a powerful statement. Once again, we're at the chessboard. We're on our side of the chessboard. We have Uno cards in our hands turned backwards, attempting to play the game of chess. And we don't even have the correct pieces to play the game of chess. Now, if we reevaluate everything that we're doing, everything that we've done up to this point, has it helped us or hurt us? Did we get tangible outcomes or did we get figurative outcomes or just conceptual outcomes? Have we actually progressed as a people, or have individuals have had certain levels of progress? The latter is true. Individuals, Black individuals have had certain degrees of progress. But how has that enhanced the whole? Racism is a team sport. As long as we're not playing racism, playing the game as a team, we're going to lose. We're going to be the model minorities that we were intended to be. Remember, we were brought here to be workers. We were brought here to be labor. We were brought here as capital. We were brought here as a resource. So now that slavery is ended and we're somewhat on our own, we're really not on our own because we're 100% dependent upon the system of white supremacy for our survival. And that's one of our major problems, is the ultimate dependence upon the system that has oppressed us. We are playing the game wrong. We're still with the Uno cards in our hands turned backwards and wondering why we can't progress. We got to understand that we need each other. We got to work together. If we want to improve our economic situation, we got to work together. Racism and other legacies of slavery predetermined the success of Black America as a group, right? One of the most glaring examples of inherited inequalities is wealth distribution. Black America's present age of ownership of the nation's wealth remains where it was in the 1860s on the eve of the Civil War. And remember, this book was written in 2001. Just for context, this book was written in 2001. And so, at that time, when nearly every Black person in America was either in full slavery or semi-slavery, Blacks owned 0.5% of this nation's wealth. The emancipation of enslaved Blacks in no sense rendered social justice and economic recompense. So economically, we haven't moved. Now, what's different, the different aspects that I could add in that is not in this book is social media, the presence of social media. This book was written in 2001. We're in 2023. So social media has become one of the media's biggest tools, right? If you look at social media today, it's almost as if Blacks are just prosperous and progressing. But if we look at the numbers, if we really look at the numbers and how much wealth do Black America actually own, I'm looking at something at usafacts.org. And it's saying in the third quarter of 2022, the nation's white household had 124.5 trillion in assets measured by the Federal Reserve. In comparison, all Black households had under 8 trillion in total assets. The white households had 124.5 trillion. Black households had 8 trillion. And this is according to the Federal Reserve. And so we are nowhere near where we need to be. We're nowhere near white America. Social media is a trick. Social media is that bullshit right now because so many Black people are on social media acting as if we're really progressing as a group of people, and we're not. We're not playing the game right. Yeah, you and your group of friends may be doing right, but as a nation of people, all the Black people in your city not doing good. All the Black people in your state not doing good because we're not playing the game right. Yes, you have to start somewhere, but it has to get better. Now, will we ever get to a point though that enough of us is working together to make significant changes? I don't know. But all we can do is work towards it, right? So Dr. Anderson, picking up page 6, the last paragraph on page 6. Second to the last paragraph on page 6. Today, more than 140 years later, we are 100% free, yet Black Americans still only 1/2% of the nation's wealth. Today, the income of Blacks as compared to whites has regressed to the level it was at the end of the 1960s. Approximately 38% of the Black population is beneath the poverty line, and another 1/3 is marginal, just above the poverty line. The limited assets that Black Americans most often have, such as automobiles and personal effects, depreciate rather than appreciate in value. Blacks even find that our homes, usually our most valuable assets, have a limited market, and the prices are dictated by urban renewal, expressways, or gentrification. The average Black person passes on 0 assets to future generations, and that's a problem. The average Black person passes on 0 assets to future generations. You can't build wealth from brokenness. Wealth is a team sport. Wealth is a team game.